Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Tavis, Smiley. Though a special prosecutor stopped short of saying anyone in the White House illegally exposed the identity of CIA agent Valerie Plame, some say the damage done to her life, career, and to national security is irreparable. Tonight, a conversation with one of Ms. Plame's former CIA colleagues who remains outraged at the White House for its role in the leak case. Jim Marcinkowski first met Valerie Plame during their days in training at the CIA. He is now the deputy city attorney in Royal Oak, Michigan. Also tonight, Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Alice Walker is here. Her most famous book, The Color Purple, is being turned into a Broadway musical. Previews for the much-anticipated production began earlier tonight in New York City. We'll also get her thoughts on the life and legacy of Rosa Parks. We're glad you've joined us. That's all coming up right now.
Tavis Smiley is made possible in part by Toyota, makers of the 2006 Toyota Camry. Toyota, now that's moving you forward.
Tavis Smiley is brought to you in part by Walmart. Every member in the community has a responsibility to help it grow stronger. Every community partner has that same responsibility. Walmart is committed to the community and to the people it serves.
And by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
It's very rare when a current or former member of the CIA speaks to the media, but the outing of Valerie Plame as a covert agent has led one of her former colleagues to break that long-standing silence. Jim Marcinkowski is a former covert operative who trained with Valerie Plame at the CIA facility known as The Farm. He is now deputy city attorney in Royal Oak, Michigan, and joins us tonight from the Motor City in Detroit. Mr. Marcinkowski, nice to have you in the program, sir.
Glad to be with you.
Let me ask the obvious question. What was it about this particular case regarding Valerie Plame that got you outraged enough, as I said a moment ago, to really break with CIA tradition, or former CIA tradition, which is for you to speak out?
Well, having been in the CIA, the first egregious act that I saw was the exposure of one of our agents. It then became personal when I found out, and in fact, I had trained with Valerie. This was the person that was exposed. At that point, it enraged not only myself, but members of my entire CIA training class.
I don't mean to be naive in asking this question, but what makes you so upset about the outing of a former colleague?
Well, the damage that has been done not only to national security, but we can look at this thing on a personal level. She has been undercover for 18 years, like many of us in the CIA. She was in the operations directorate. She was training. She was undercover. The fact of the matter is, by her being exposed by the White House, she not only put her own personal security at risk, but she then risked the security of all the agents that she happened to be working with. So her own personal security was threatened, and that of all the assets that she had run on behalf of the United States overseas.
On the personal security front, I absolutely understand what you're saying, and I think anyone watching has to clearly understand what it means when you out someone who's worked undercover on a variety of very difficult cases. We understand that part. For those who think, though, it might be a bit of hyperbole to suggest that whatever Karl Rove might have done, whatever Scooter Libby might have done, threatened national security, explain to the audience from your perspective how the outing of one specific CIA undercover officer threatens national security.
It threatened national security because it was a breach of trust by this government. When you go overseas and you recruit foreign nationals to spy in their country on the behalf of the United States, what typically happens is, the very first question is, can you protect my identity? Can you protect my personal security? And the first thing a case officer has to do is ensure that person that we, the United States government, will hold that trust without breaching it. And what happens when the CIA officer gets exposed, that sends the signal that, you know what, we don't care, or we don't put this security issue as the #1 issue with the asset on the ground. So not only the CIA officer's security is threatened, but the asset's threatened. Now that sends a signal all across the world to every foreign intelligence operative acting on behalf of the United States. That's what it does. And they're all wondering, is my personal protection being protected by the United States government? Am I going to be safe? Is my family going to be safe? And when the United States government cannot protect its own home team, that being the CIA officer, then that sends the tremor around the world that perhaps the foreign assets protection is not going to be high on the list of endeavors by the White House.
So what's your sense then of how folk around the world who might be engaging with the CIA on some level view an outing like this? How does this challenge the work of the CIA operative in various places around the world?
Well, obviously what that does is sends the signal that the United States government no longer holds the trust relationship in high regard. Therefore, their own personal security is threatened. If they're going to expose, the White House is going to expose the CIA officer, then hey, if I'm a little foreign asset operating in some little country, and I look at this situation, I have to say to myself, if they're not going to protect their own CIA officers, how are they going to protect me? Or do they really even care about me? And that's the damage and the ripple effect that in effect has gone all over the world.
I wonder whether or not, let me shift gears somewhat slightly, I wonder whether or not, given some of the travail that the CIA has had of late, and I say of late over the past few years, certainly people still concerned and upset, is a better word, I guess, about what did or did not happen with regard to 9/11, what they knew and what they didn't know, and how that intelligence was handled or mishandled, as it were. I wonder whether or not you think that the American public, beyond the politics in this, really cares about an issue like this. And if they don't, how do we get them to care, given the feelings that many people have perhaps about the CIA these days and the work they do?
Well, first of all, they need to care, but they first have to understand what the issue really is. The outing of the CIA officer is nothing more than a police chief in any police department across the country exposing one of their undercover officers. That's what happened in this case. It's not hard to understand. And I think everyone understands what the ramifications of that kind of exposure is. It not only would threaten the police officer's life, but, you know, it probably end up threatening the police chief's life once the person's exposed. So that's on one level. I think it's easy to understand, and people got to understand that, in fact, it is just like any other police department operation.
Many people saw you on 60 Minutes this past Sunday addressing this very issue. I wonder whether or not you gave any pause, any thought to, any consideration of what it might mean for you to come out and to speak out as a former CIA officer, given the politics that are clearly all around this particular issue.
Well, obviously there's risk in anything we do. My own personal security I don't believe is at risk. Obviously there's politics being played here, and I'm not concerned about that. But you know, the real issue here is the politics being played between the White House and the CIA and the information that was provided by the CIA after 9/11, on whether it was provided without influence by the Vice President or was influenced by the Vice President when he visited the CIA. Those kinds of issues are going back and forth as far as what information we can trust. You know, are we going to believe the CIA? Are we going to believe the White House? So there's politics going back between the agency and the White House, and that kind of politics has never taken place before, not on this level.
Before I let you go, what did you remember, what did you recall, if anything, when you learned that you had, in fact, trained at the farm with Ms. Plam? We started our conversation by you suggesting that it really got to you and you realized that you had trained with her. What do you recall about those days?
Well, the agency screens its people incredibly well. You're the best, the brightest. Valerie Plam's a very intelligent, capable, and now experienced CIA officer. And the thing I remember most is from our CIA training is they built a cohesive team in our class. I'm sure they're having second thoughts about how effective that team is, because we held each other in trust for 18 years until exposed by this White House. Now, some of our classmates are still in the CIA, some are out. Whether we were inside or whether we were outside, we held each other's identity a secret for 18 years until it was exposed by this White House.
Let me offer this then as an exit question, since you are an attorney, deputy city attorney, in fact, in Royal Oak, Michigan, outside of Detroit. Let me ask you, given your experience with the law, whether or not you think that there are things that we ought to do vis-a-vis the law, vis-a-vis legislation, to make sure this doesn't happen again. Ought there be stiffer penalties? Ought the law be more clear? We don't know whether Rove is going to be charged. Clearly, Scooter Libby was. Some think that Rove may not be, but certainly if he didn't step across the line, he has chalk on his shoes. What do you think about what we ought to do going forward here to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, number one, if the government wasn't controlled all by one political party, we'd probably see hearings on Capitol Hill looking into what exactly happened. But I don't think the law obviously has to be fixed up. It has to be tightened up. There are some provisions in the law that make it hard to prosecute. And you look at intent or negligence or reckless disregard, those kinds of things, all kinds of standards as far as the criminal law is concerned. But the real issue here is a moral issue. We should be operating on a high moral standard, and that's where trust. You can't legislate trust. You can't legalize it or make it illegal not to uphold the trust. So the bigger issue here is a moral issue of trust. And yes, I think we do have to look at the law, perhaps tighten that up. But the law will only go so far. There are other people that are responsible for this outing that have still not been identified.
Jim Marcinkowski, now Deputy City Attorney in Royal Oak, Michigan, former CIA classmate of Valerie Plame, of course outed by somebody in the White House, Louis Libby, of course, indicted now by the grand jury for at least obstruction of justice. Mr. Marcinkowski, last time you on the program, all the best to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. Up next on this program, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Alice Walker, her book, The Color Purple, now a Broadway play. Stay with us. Pleased to welcome Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Alice Walker to this program. Her most famous book, The Color Purple, is coming to Broadway in the form of a new musical produced by people like Quincy Jones and Oprah Winfrey. Previews began earlier tonight at the Broadway Theater in New York. Opening night for the general public is December 1st. Her latest book is Now is the Time to Open Your Heart, out earlier this year in paperback. Alice Walker, nice to have you on the program.
I'm very happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. I had just arrived in Los Angeles when The Color Purple, just for a minute really, when The Color Purple first came out. And you won't remember this, and I don't expect you to, but I was at the premiere that night, and I got you to sign my Color Purple ticket.
Really?
And I have it framed on the wall in my house. When you walk in my house, one of the first things you see is an autographed ticket of The Color. I should have brought it to show you tonight.
I wish
not
you
that
had.
Not that you care, but anyway.
I do.
I see your autograph on my picture on my wall every day in my house. So it's nice to have you on the program.
Thank you.
When I said a moment ago that The Color Purple is your most famous book, one, I assume you agree with that, but number two, I wonder if that's okay with you, given all that you've done. Is it okay? I mean, I know you love the success of it, but is it okay that people think of The Color Purple as your best work?
It was especially written for them, so it's fine for them to want to think of that book. It's not necessarily my favorite of my books. The book that came after it is, I think, my favorite.
For those who don't know the book that came after that?
The Temple of My Familiar.
Why is that one your favorite?
Well, because the first one, the Color Purple, which actually was my third novel, is the novel that I dealt with my grandparents and my parents and the generations before me. But in the Temple of My Familiar, I deal more with my own time. And it's just a more complicated and complex story. It took me 2 years to write it. And I just love it more.
I wonder whether or not you think that that may be one of the reasons why it was not received in the way The Color Purple was, because it was more complicated and more complex. I raise that not to cast aspersion on your work, but only because oftentimes it's difficult for people to really appreciate works that appear to be complicated.